working. You can just pass it amongst you. So first of all, I would like to start the discussion actually opening up to questions from everybody, because I think we've had a very disciplined panelists and speakers. You've been really, really good at keeping everything very tight, but we haven't had the chance to ask many questions. So please, if you have any comments or questions, fire away. I think they are ready. They seem to be very ready to take it. Any questions?
So I'm going to ask a question, and then I want to add something for each one of them. Is okay? So the question is for, let me check your name, Gao Yo. Okay. In your study, do you have a control sample? When I say a control sample, a classroom where actually you didn't ask or you didn't put the book, you didn't give them the book. So actually, it is clear what I'm asking. So you use this storytelling, you gave them a book, you read this book to them, and then you analyze if actually they were doing some actions related to the book. But in your study, did you have a group where actually you did not read the story?
So for the
Sorry, now? Okay.
Yeah, for the control group, we didn't read the story for them during the intervention, but after the whole experiment, we gave everyone a book so that they can take them away.
Okay, so you have a control group.
Yeah, we have.
Okay, sorry, I didn't read that. Yeah. And the other thing I say for everyone, a really nice project and research. But what I would like to know is what is your background and why you were interested in these particular topics? All of you.
So you can, yes, you can start, or you can start from one end. Shall we do that? Let's do it in an orderly way. Does it work? Yes, you can keep it closer so we can.
Kauthar, and I am from University of Nottingham, originally from Uganda. So we chose the Maggie Centers and Health and Wellbeing because initially we were trying to look at how buildings affect senses, and then we kind of navigated our way to health and well-being because it's more important to look at how the buildings affect people's emotions or affect their health and well-being.
Personally. Yes, exactly. Was it topic that you chose, right?
Sorry?
You chose the topic, or was it suggested by the tutor?
Yeah, I chose it. I think I was drawn first by the Maggie Centers and their vision, and the story just spoke to me as a person. That's why I chose to do research in it. Yeah, I think that's the base answer.
I would like to say that it was really challenging. It's because there was not like that much of research about health and well-being. So in terms of like qualitative, using IES V tool or somehow, so it was challenging to do this. Yeah.
So you liked it because it was difficult. That's why. That's a good reason to do it.
I'm Divya and she's Neha. So we are from University of Nottingham as well. So mainly we started off by looking like the hot and humid climate, like how a building at during 1980s was designed for natural ventilation, and at the present scenario with the pollution and everything, how is it working? Because most of the we both are from India, so it is like over the time the entire purpose of the design has been evolved, and because of the pollution and everything, like we just wanted to see how the purpose has been like changed and how we have to adapt to the design itself at some point.
I would like to add to that. So I wanted to understand how we can design in a pollution related scenario, because it is the challenge we are facing in India a lot. And um, I was interested in understanding natural ventilation, but there are pros and cons of designing with natural ventilation in a pollution stricken environment. And I thought it was the need of the time to understand that. So that's how we got to thinking about that.
So our project team has really focused on the school overheating study, and I think we all experienced a very hot week last week. So the overheating problem is really a big problem. Especially the UK has experienced a very hot summer last year, and when we reading and reviewed the literatures, we find that children prefer lower temperature than adults. So that means that they would suffer more than adults, and after we reviewed the literature, they find that students usually don't know what to do, or they don't have confidence. Like they don't know whether they can take off their jumper, or they can open the window, or ask the teacher to open the window. So we want to use the storytelling to tell them that you can ask for help, or you can just do something to help with yourself. Especially when we are doing our research, we find that the children even take an ice bag on their neck to cool themselves down. So the problem is kind of big, so we want to help them with that.
So your personal interest was because you were too hot last summer, right?
Yeah.
That's why you
I
got
know.
interested in overheating, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the reason why I interest with my topic is because I work as a government officer, and I am more often involved in the housing development program. And then from my background, I see that in Indonesia we have many housing development program, but we don't know if it's efficient or not. So I think it's important, especially for me who involved in these programs, to make or to assess the housing conditions, so I can give the recommendation to the government. Thank you.
And the university you're from is?
I'm from University College London.
Yes.
Mine was thermal comfort and childcare. My topic was as personal as it gets because of definitely my previous experience in the sector. So I'm just trying to give you an idea about what the situation in India is with childcare. We have a largest population of orphan children in India, with probably very less infrastructure available to shelter them. So whatever that's there or available in the country to shelter these children are of minimal standards. So because I worked in a shelter home where I got to interact with these children, I realized thermal comfort as such, because just to point out an example, children were refusing to sleep in the dormitory because it was overheated. The roofing in the dormitory was an asbestos roofing, and it was not insulated, and the children wouldn't sleep in the dormitory, which was retrofitted by the organization that I worked for, where we put insulated roofing, puff panels, and false ceiling, and etc., which encouraged the child to finally sleep properly in the dormitory rather than finding space on the floor in the main hall. So the idea was to, understand what it takes for children. They need bare minimum, but I wanted to understand what this bare minimum was. So through the interviews, it was quite productive and informative for me to understand what they wanted with their environment. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. For any questions from the floor? Have you thought about something? Yes.
Well, first I would like to make a comment. I would like to praise that I see so much studies now on daylighting and its association with comfort and well-being. But I would like just to, and also as a comment, all of you have done studies mainly looking at overheating, or also associated with the problem of pollution, but most of your thermal comfort studies address overheating. And I was wondering, you came to study in the UK, which predominantly studies problems associated with heating of houses and fuel poverty, and not, although nowadays there are more regulations and more emphasis on overheating problems. I was wondering if you would like to propose given the climate change and that temperatures are rising, that if you think that overheating is clearly the problem in the future and more regulations should be emphasizing those issues rather than specifically or mainly focusing on heating buildings. And I would like to praise also passive approaches like shading and all those solutions that you have proposed for guidances. I know it's too generic, but if anyone wants to make a comment, even to take back to, if you're planning to go back to your countries, if that will be your emphasis of your future research. Thank you.
I think I would say it's definitely going to be an issue in the coming years. And I would think that the architecture should move from the focus on adapting to the overheating problem and using more resilient strategies. So like you said before, the passive means of shading or ventilation, and somehow quantifying that into a regulation that can be used across the different industries, but also, I mean, across the different typologies in architecture, but also trying to make sure that we work hand in hand with the urban sector so that the shading of trees helps the shading of the building and the cooling of the building in overheating scenarios, for example. So I think there is still a bit more work to be done in what regulations to follow, but I think they should all be centered around the UN SDGs or resilience as a theme, basically.
I think the overheating problem is definitely significant in UK because UK don't use the air conditioning. Like my country, China, we are all using air conditioning, but the energy will become another problem. So the balance between the energy and the comfort will be a future problem we need to solve. So I think for UK buildings, more lots of strategies will be needed because for the modern school buildings, the low thermal mass problem, the overglazing problems, that's, well, the buildings, some problems need to be fixed. I think that's for UK.
Absolutely, and this is the overglazing is a problem not just in the UK, but also in other climates where you would not just using common sense expect that, isn't it? Like in India, and I think it's very relevant the fact that you are studying. Now we can say a traditional example of passive design and natural ventilation, which is Charles Corrier's building, because it's still relevant and should be more applied, right? Whereas we know the trend, unfortunately, in India, which is also to have overglazing. There is a question from there, but if you want to say something, please.
Yeah, is a different, I mean, related question, but you are all from abroad, yes? Do you think that it's an exaggeration with overheat in this country? You're coming from really hot countries. So, huh?
Is there an exaggeration? Is
So even if I come from India, which is overly hot, I felt very uncomfortable out here because we do not have ceiling fans or we do not have that height and space inside our rooms. So I felt cramped and suffocated during the last 2 weeks. So yes.
So you see,
Yeah.
then we're not exaggerating. Yeah, I know.
We have actually had like much higher temperatures than what we saw last week. Like the maximum I have experienced was like 39, 40 degrees. And but last week with 31 degrees, I'm just like sweating and everything. And mostly the openings are reduced here because of the cold season we are in for the most of the year. But I think we should start considering about the overheating as well from now.
the windows being restricted
Yeah.
is one challenge.
It's
You cannot
open it completely.
So one night we decided outside.
I think to an extent it's an over exaggeration, and to an extent it's inevitable, because most of the buildings are built to conserve heat, and that's the main issue. But the heat itself, the external temperatures themselves, are not too high. It's just the problem with the architecture, and that's what bothers people. And I think coming from countries where air conditioning is very prevalent, then that's where you find the issue. But the issue in itself is we actually love the hot days. Everyone loves the summer days. It's just when you're inside the building, that's when it matters most.
Do you want to add something else? No, there we have two questions. There's one over here.
I am a student from here, and I will start by saying that all of the work was super interesting to me. And I have a very student-friendly question, which is that you all had questionnaires and you had questions that you asked groups, fixed groups. So my question is, how do you, first of all, quantify and objectify that data is something that I am always curious to know.
For my study, to develop the questionnaire, I use the literature review. So there's actually many studies about the housing conditions. So yeah, I'm just looking for the many studies that have indicators about the housing quality, and then from that I can like transform it into the questionnaire, so I can find that the answers for example for the overcrowding. The previous study said that overcrowding is actually occurred because of the number of people exceeded the number of living space. So from that information, I can calculate it and objectify the problems by developing the questionnaires. Thank you.
Well, our questionnaires is for the pupils, so we are trying to make it more interesting for them, because for past year research, it shows that if the questionnaire is all words or sentence, the pupils, it's hard for them to focus on that. So we are trying to use the sticker task and giving them some images to choose, so that they can, well, be patient for that. Don't do that. So for the real research, they really like these things. So, and we want to see the thermal comfort. So our thermal sensation vote, thermal preference votes are based on the ASHRAE. And for the past year literature proof that it's more easy for students to understand this kind of skills.
So mine was largely depending on the qualitative data, that was the transcribed interviews. So I coded the entire interview transcribed, whichever, and then basically trying to understand based on the themes. And then I did quantify the codes based on how many children and how many, like based on what is the frequency of that kind of theme being repeated, giving me an idea of how intense one theme was, like the uncomfortable event or probably an adaptive behavior that they were mentioning. So it was trying to quantify the qualitative data by coding exactly. But quantitative data was a piece of cake, but then you have softwares for that. But the other one was a manual labor, yeah.
Here? No, it's been already answered, perhaps.
Hi, my name is Elsa. I'm from the University of Nottingham. And my question is for the two cases with the kids and for the Indonesia research. Did you manage to do some design proposals or to take the interventions to architecture measures that how could you improve what you found that was bothering and the comfort? Did you manage to do some design proposals for that improvements?
Yes, in my case, so in the orphanages, mostly what you see is they have bunk beds in the dormitory and it's all ceiling fans. So the major complaint that came from the children where they were not getting the fan, the cooling from the fan when they're sleeping on the lower bunk. So so the children rather preferred sleeping on the floor than sleeping in the lower bunk. So that actually showed that we either you could think of a different idea for the bunk bed situation or have fans at a lower height like wall mounted or standing fans that would give the access to everyone sleeping in the dormitory. And the second couple of I think concrete has become very popular and it's quite cheap also in India for construction. So it is just covered the entire surroundings of every buildings today, like with pavements or all of that, which actually increase a lot of overheating in the immediate surroundings. So even if you keep the windows open, you get the hot air inside. So that's all like few guidelines that you can give for future design of shelter care or residences like that. Yeah.
Okay. For me, actually, I didn't manage to give like a proposal of the housing recommendation, but in this study, I only give some recommendation, some kind of recommendations. But hopefully, maybe in the future, I will develop my study and then try to create some design to improve the housing conditions in Indonesia. Thank you.
Maybe you can answer the question as well. Maybe not. Let's leave it. Let's see. Okay, we have another 10 minutes. If there are, we can have we can start the break early and have some coffee. But before that, I would like again to congratulate you and also make a remark because it's quite interesting that all of your studies are actually regarding either housing or children or people that are in other type of care settings, which is something really refreshing and something that in the past we've always been told, don't go there kind of thing. It's difficult and it's controversial. There are barriers. And it's wonderful to see from a point of view of equality, diversity, and inclusion that we all, everywhere, we pay so much lip service about actually the contribution, the very concrete contribution that you are making by bringing these topics to the fore. So I would like to deeply thank you about that, and I hope that more research. And it's also not, I think, I have to say, it is not by chance that all of the studies here, the majority of the studies are by ladies. And majority of you, and I hope that you will be doing more of these studies and bring these topics and the recommendation that you are making to some concrete realization. So I think we are all in agreement that is great, and we just go for it and then keep going. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so now we can have this comfort break, which was supposed to be 10 minutes, but we have been very efficient with time, so we can have more coffee, comfort break, and be back in 20 minutes or so. I think we'll be fine. Thank you.